Right now, we are pleased to be joined by a very familiar name here in the Acadiana area, Scott Angelle, joining us on the phone lines right now. He is the founder of USA Energy Workers and joining us to talk about the state of the oil and gas industry, looking back over 2022 and looking ahead to 2023. Scott, man, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you, Brandon. And like I always say, when I join you guys, it's always good to know that they got a Como in the pilot seat over there, represent the Cajun Nation, and then to have your wingman there, Mark Pope, go back a long way with Mark, doing some amazing things in Acadiana. So thank you all, and good morning, and it's good to be a part of your show this morning, sir.
Yeah, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us. And, you know, we do need to start with what's happening out in the Gulf Coast right now as far as the search that was suspended for the 4 workers following the helicopter crash. Some debris was found yesterday, and like I said, the search was suspended. And it's just yet another reminder of the hard work that the men and women that go out into the Gulf of Mexico put, to keep the oil and gas industry going.
You're so right. And, it's a terrible, terrible subject to be able to discuss the difficult decision that the Coast Guard made to have to call off the search and rescue mission there, and imagine the pain of those families. So, all of Acadiana and all of the oil and gas industry comes together this morning to pray for those families, for comfort at this very, very difficult time. But you're right. It is a absolute reminder of when the men and women of the offshore oil and gas industry, and it's important to understand how important that industry is to America. About 1 in every 6 barrels of oil that's produced in America comes from the Gulf of Mexico. So very, very, very strong part of America's portfolio. And we have men and women who, for generations here, have put on their hard hats and their steel-toe boots and set out to find the fuel to energize this great country. And it is important to note that every single one of those men and women that go out there to do it got to get there either in a boat or a helicopter, while the rest of us get to ride in our vehicles or take our elevators upstairs. It doesn't work as easy for those folks. So I, for one, recognize how important the men and women of our oil and gas industry, in particular this offshore industry, are to our country. And we need to find continued ways to celebrate and elevate it. I'm very, very appreciative, especially over the last several years, very, very appreciative of our healthcare workers, certainly our first responders, our police officers, our firefighters, absolutely our school teachers, our military folks. Those folks make incredible sacrifices in those professions for America, and we ought to thank them. But at the same time, I'm reminded of the cliche that if you can read, thank a teacher. I think it's so true. I would like to say, if you can read at night in your warm home, thank a teacher and a USA Energy Worker, because that didn't happen by luck.
Absolutely.
And, you just mentioned USA Energy Workers, which is the organization you're with now. How long has that organization been around, Scott, and how long you've been working in the energy industry or with the energy industry for a very long time? Talk a little bit about your organization and its origin and what exactly you folks are doing.
Yeah, Mark, thank you. So when I left the Federal Service, there had always been a part of me that recognized that there was not enough focus on the men and women who were wearing the steel-toe boots and the hard hats. I'd always felt there was a measure missing in that national conversation, yet I was never in a position to be able to make a difference in that particular area. So when I left the Federal Service in January of 21, I thought it was a good time to take all of the knowledge that I had been blessed with over a 30-year career working in and out of government and in an industry, that we would do something to, again, bring a focus and almost in a sense to take a page out of the farmers' playbook. I'm very impressed with our American farmers. They produce, and that they not only produce and feed us, our American farmers feed the world. And when we think of foreign policy in this country, we don't think of the president of Tyson Foods. We think of that farmer who's getting up early in the morning, who's putting on those boots and those khaki pants and getting out there and sweating and fighting the elements and doing everything he can, working, tilling the soil or ranching, whatever it may be the case, to feed us and to feed the world. And I began to draw some analogies between those folks and our oil and gas workers and our energy workers. And so I felt that if we could just, again, rally and brand, if you would, in brand, and the brand is to me, is to celebrate and elevate the USA energy workers so that they can become more, a bigger, perhaps, part of the national conversation. We got to take our energy workers off the bench. I mean, this administration has vilified energy in such a way. And why is that important? Look, we've had 6 recessions from 1973 to 2019. And every one of those recessions, every one, 6 in a row, were all preceded by a spike in energy prices. Yeah. As goes, it's not debatable, as goes America's access to affordable, I'm not saying cheap, but affordable energy. As goes America's access to affordable energy, so goes America's economic performance. It's very, very clear. We build more homes and we build more cars when we have affordable energy prices. So in a lot of ways, the union auto worker in Michigan is connected to the offshore oil and gas worker, no doubt. And we're starting to see now, the reaction. Instead of increasing domestic production, the administration said, no, we're going to go in the name of the environment. Now, this is again, and I don't want to be personal. I don't get on radio and get personal with politics. I'm just talking about policy here. Right. And we are saying no to USA energy workers, no to Boudreaux's and Thibodeau's and Cuomo's, okay, and even a few popes in there. And in the meantime, we're saying no to those folks, and we're asking Saudi Arabia and Venezuela to give us more. That's an insult. It's an insult to USA energy workers. It's an insult to the consumer. And instead of increasing production to get inflation under control, because energy costs is such a driver of inflation, what we elected to do, to increase interest rates. So now it's now more expensive to buy a home. It's going to be more difficult to buy a car. And, who knows what happens. But all the smart money for 2023 is that we're going to enter recession in this country, and we're going to have some pretty substantial layoffs. And we believe at USA Energy Workers that there is a path, and that path is to have a policy that balances the 3 E's. And those 3 E's are energy, environment, and economy. And they're like a 3-legged bar stool. And, we all know what happens when one of the legs gets too short on a 3-leg bar stool. Somebody comes tumbling down. Mm-hmm. And in some case, the red states have captured one of those E's, and that's energy. The blue states have captured another E, and that's environment. And I would say there's a purple E, and it affects us all, and it's the economy. Yeah. And we need to have policies that balance those 3 E's. And we think the way to do that is to help unleash the U.S. energy worker. And why is that? Because when you take a look, particularly at the Gulf of Mexico, and our nation's policy here has been to pause and cancel offshore lease sales, and they're doing that in the name of the environment. Yeah. Yet the data from the 2016 Obama-Biden report federal document concludes that not having lease sales in the Gulf of Mexico would lead to higher carbon emissions because we'd have to get that fuel sourced from nations often with higher carbon intensity production. And that's exactly what we did. So in the name of the environment, we're saying no to USA energy workers and saying yes to OPEC. And the facts just don't add up. And it's unfortunate because at the end of the day, we're going to have these economic problems showing up at a zip code near us. And our USA energy workers are just ready. They just need to be unleashed. We've vilified this industry so much in the last couple of years. And the inconsistency coming out of Washington, D.C. is absolutely incredible when you hear one day, the White House saying, no more drilling, no more drilling, no more drilling. And then the next day later, the Secretary of Energy is like, no, we'd like to work with y'all. We need you to get production up. Well, we just need some consistency, and we don't want to be a booty call for the White House. The energy workers in this country do not want to be a booty call for the White House. We're looking for a long-term investment in this relationship where we can get out there, make the capital investments, recruit the people, recruit the talent, and get that production going, and hopefully lower energy prices so that we don't have these kind of economic recessions that are on the horizon.
Right.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I feel busted you right there, but I feel
no, good info.
I got a good follow up, but I'm gonna let Mark get his in first, and then I want to ask you something. Since you brought up OPEC, I'll get into that.
Mine is to kind of define, add a little definition and clarity to something he said, Scott. And you talked about in Louisiana, and I'm pretty sure when I say Gulf oil, to a large degree, the oil we produce in Louisiana is a higher grade. It's called light sweet crude. So take that, run with it, and talk about the quality of oil coming from Louisiana, because there are various grades and qualities of raw oil, if you will.
Yeah, so not every barrel is created equal, and we're blessed in Louisiana here with production that doesn't have as much sulfur content. And the reason that's important is that sulfur has to be refined out at the refinery, and you can imagine that it takes more time and more money to refine out a product that needs to come out of the raw material. So yeah, the Louisiana sweet crude is always going to trade a little higher because it has something that the market values a little bit more, and that's important, and all those things are important. But in today's world, the thing that the experts tell us, and I don't debate it because I'm not the climatologist, but what the experts tell us is there's two things that drive climate change. One of them is the carbon emissions, and the other one is methane that is flared or vented. And this is important, okay? This is absolutely important because I do think that we're into an energy transition. I do think that our children and grandchildren are going to have a variety of energy sources that are going to be vastly different from what we had, and I'm okay with that. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm talking to you on a cell phone. My daddy would crack up if he thought that I could have a telephone call without a wire attached to it. So, look, technologies come and things change, and that's okay. But what's not okay is when we make these changes and these so-called transitions. A transition presupposes that we have a plan, and we have no plan in this country right now. What we're doing right now is we're vilifying one industry to try to take that production off the table, and we're throwing everything to the wind and just say, let's just see what happens. And it's amazing because while that's our approach, I recently read an article in the Wall Street Journal about maybe 45 days ago that says Saudi Arabia tells the West to fix its energy problems with more investments. I saw recently where the United Kingdom, who had been one of the leaders in kind of saying, no, we're not going to have offshore lease sales, they just decided, no, they're going back to offshore lease sales. So, other places are looking in the mirror and seeing that, this so-called let's rush to a different type of energy portfolio is just easy. We just go down off the shelf, go down to Walmart and give me one bucket of solar, one bucket of wind, one bucket of this, and the hell with oil and gas. That's not even realistic, and it's going to start. And it is already beginning to have an impact in this country. And look, guys on this, you and the three of us, we probably can afford another 25-cent increase in the cost of a gallon of gasoline. But single moms going across town, picking up kids at daycare, they can't. And the thing, it's not just gasoline. It's important that your listeners understand this. In February, the biggest shocker in this country in February, hear me very well. Mm-hmm. The biggest shocker in either late January or early February in this country is going to be when Americans open up their utility bills.
Okay.
It's going to be pain and suffering, and we are going to have people in this country, senior citizens, are going to have to make a choice. And I said it, and I can guarantee you're going to read about it. I can guarantee you that as much as Joe Namath guaranteed the New York Jets would win the Super Bowl, I can guarantee you're going to hear stories of senior citizens in this country having to make a choice between paying their prescription drug bill or the utility bill. Well, so it's unfortunate, and we're blessed with these natural resources, but we keep taking them off the table, and there's a better way. And again, what we say is there's time for course correction. There's an opportunity to start treating oil and gas industry, the Gulf of Mexico, the stuff that comes out of the Permian, the stuff that comes out of the Haynesville, the stuff that comes out of the Bakken. It's better than the stuff that we're getting from other parts of the world. So let's embrace it, put our people to work.
Well, then you mentioned prescriptions. Unfortunately, because of current things happening at the state level, it's even going to be more hard for people, especially in rural areas, to be able to get their prescriptions filled. But that's a whole nother topic. We're speaking with Scott Angelle, former director of the Bureau of Safety and Environmental Enforcement under the Trump administration, also former member, District 2 member of the Louisiana Public Service Commission. We got time for one more before we have to let you go, sir. So, you mentioned OPEC. You mentioned, paying for a gallon of gas. So, gas has been falling for quite some time. The statewide average, though, has gone up over the past few days by a few cents. Now, looking at the future, and you mentioned OPEC. And so OPEC, they've already come out and said that they're gonna keep oil production output down by 2 million barrels per day. And then you've also got, the whole Russian invasion of Ukraine, and you've got the European Union, Australia, Japan, U.S., Canada, UK. They've agreed to take some action against. They would launch a $60 per barrel price cap on Russian crude oil, which then Russia could respond. Can you, as someone who's been at the national level dealing with these issues, can you touch on that before we have to let you go?
Yeah, look, anytime that you have these decisions to try to artificially put price caps on things, I don't think they've really ever worked. So I have a concern. I understand it's well intended, but aiming high and missing wide. Usually, what happens with price caps in that regard. And so, look, this is the deal. There has been a lot of talk about, the price has come down here recently, and so maybe we headed to a better spot. Well, we released 180 million barrels from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. We had the lowest level we've ever been with regards, maybe in 30 years, I should say, with regards to the Strategic Petroleum Reserve levels. Okay, so that stuff was released, and it has had some moderating impact on the price, but there's not a whole bunch left to release. That's number one. Okay. Number two, when the price comes down a little bit, it reminds me of the wide receiver who's going down the field, catches a pass, and stands up and starts to point towards the end zone because he just made a first down.
Yeah.
And he's celebrating the first down when he's getting his ass kicked by 25 points on the scoreboard. But we shouldn't be celebrating first downs in America. Energy policy, we need to celebrate touchdowns. And having the price moderate from a real high to come down in a little bit because we released 180 million barrels, it's not, to me, something worth celebrating. I'm happy for the relief, but I also know that there's consequences. I'm also happy when at 18 years old found a fifth of bourbon, but the next day it had a lot of consequences for that, right? So there's consequences that are happening, are going to happen, and I would suspect, and who knows what the future holds, because it's a world commodity, but I would suspect when we get into the driving season of starting March, April, May of next year, you're going to see those prices starting to go back up again. And I think there's a fact, Brandon and Mark, and I know you need to wrap up, but I think it's important that the listeners understand this, because I've been really digging in something. And, of course, look, when OPEC decided they were going to cut, you mentioned that, we all start looking at, well, okay, that's going to be a huge, huge impact. That's a huge impact, and on and so forth. The inconvenient truth to all of this, and this may be the second time that this is talked about on radio and across America. OPEC did not cause this problem, and let me tell you why. When you take a look at what OPEC decided, they cut 2 million barrels a day worldwide. Okay. Of those 2 million barrels a day that they cut, only 4% of that 2 million headed to America. So let's do the math. Even at Bro Bridge High, 4% of 2 million is 80,000 barrels a day. That's our proportionate share of that recent OPEC cut. Okay? So 80,000 barrels a day. Yet, when we compare total USA crude oil production in 2019, pre-COVID, to where we're going to end up this year in 2022, we down 500,000 barrels a day in USA production. In USA production alone, we are down 500,000 barrels a day. If we take just offshore, we down 250,000 barrels a day offshore. So the conclusion is that if we just went back to 2019 production in this country, we could overcome the recent OPEC cuts by 6 times by just returning to the 2019 production in America. Yeah. We could overcome it 3 times over by returning to the 2019 USA offshore production. So there are solutions that are out there in the toolbox, and it starts with recognizing that energy costs are a driver of inflation, and high energy prices impact the least among us, and it is absolutely important that we make a course correction. You know, I'm going to continue to do my thing, working with guys like yourself, trying to get that message out there so that we can have public policy. That is really not political. And look, when we talk about offshore, I'll tell you this, we've had offshore lease sales been embraced by 13 presidents. 13 presidents over 55 years, 52 years. We've had bipartisan, nonpartisan approach to using the national asset that lays off our coast in the Gulf of Mexico. We've for 13 consecutive presidents, we have valued that offshore production and the contribution it makes to America's portfolio. So this is not a political deal. This is just really factual, and there's an opportunity for us to make a course correction, and hopefully by using facts, not emotion, if we use facts and not emotion, hopefully we can get folks to see the world the way we see it.
Scott Angelle, hey, thank you so much for your time. He is the founder of USA Energy Workers. Thank you so much for the time and for the insight into what's happening in the oil and gas industry.
Thanks, guys. Happy New Year. Visit us at usaenergyworkers.com. Sign the petition. Get off the sidelines. Let's continue to tell America that we're ready to get off the bench and put our USA Energy Workers. Again, Happy New Year. Look forward to seeing you guys soon. Bye-bye now.
Great info. Happy New Year.
All right.